In 1943, the Japanese Empire built the ultimate fortress. It was called Rabaul. To Tokyo, this wasn't just an island base, it was the Southern Shield. They hollowed out volcanoes to build bunkers. They paved the jungle to build 6 massive airfields. They filled the harbor with cruisers and destroyers. And they packed it with 100,000 troops. It was the strongest bastion in the Pacific. General Hitoshi Imamura called it Impregnable. He believed it was untouchable. But in November 1943, General Imamura made a fatal mistake. He didn't just fortify Rabaul, he overloaded it. Believing that mass concentration was the key to victory, he ordered hundreds of aircraft, Zeros, Betty bombers, Val dive bombers to gather there. He packed them wingtip-to-wingtip on the runways, a display of overwhelming power. For more untold World War II stories like this, make sure to subscribe. He thought he was building an unstoppable fist. In reality, he was building the world's largest target. The Americans were watching. High-altitude reconnaissance planes saw the overcrowded airfields. They saw the ships packed into the harbor like sardines. They realized that Rabaul wasn't a shield anymore. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. On November 2, 1943, the spark arrived. The Japanese radar, crude and ineffective, failed. The first warning the pilots on the ground got was the sound of 349 American engines roaring overhead. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Because the Japanese planes were packed so tightly, a single bomb didn't just destroy one plane, it destroyed 5. Burning fuel spilled across the tarmac, igniting neighboring aircraft. Pilots running to their cockpits were cut down by strafing Hellcats before they could even turn their engines over. In 90 minutes, the Invincible air wing of Rabaul was shattered. But the Americans weren't done. They knew they had the fortress in a chokehold. On November 5th, they returned. Then again on November 11th. This time, they brought the carriers Essex, Bunker Hill, and Independence. Over 500 aircraft darkened the sky. The Japanese commanders watched in horror as their impregnable fortress turned into a cage. The harbor became a cauldron of burning oil. Heavy cruisers, the pride of the fleet, were smashed at anchor, unable to maneuver. The anti-aircraft fire was blinding, but it was useless. The volume of American attackers overwhelmed the defenses. A Japanese sailor later wrote, "The air smelled of burning iron. It felt like the island itself was screaming." In just 10 days, the Japanese lost hundreds of aircraft. They lost their best pilots. But worst of all, they lost the sea. With the Air Force destroyed and the warships crippled, Rabaul was no longer a fortress. It was a prison. The Americans didn't invade. They didn't land a single Marine on the beaches. They didn't need to. They simply cut the supply lines. Rabaul, with its 100,000 men, was now completely isolated. No food, no fuel, no ammo. The Southern Shield had become a burden that Japan could no longer support. Admiral Kusaka ordered the surviving ships to flee. The once mighty 11th Air Fleet was reduced to rusting wrecks. The 100,000 soldiers were left behind. They dug into their tunnels. They waited for an invasion that never came. They became gardeners, planting sweet potatoes in the volcanic ash just to survive. They watched as the war moved past them, leaving them to rot in the jungle. The tragedy of Rabaul wasn't that it was conquered. It was that it was ignored. The Americans bypassed it, using it only as a live-fire training ground for new pilots. The fortress that was supposed to stop the Allied advance became a spectator to its own defeat. When Australian forces finally entered Rabaul in 1945, after the surrender, they found a ghost city. Thousands of men still at their posts, surrounded by the rusting skeletons of the Air Force that was supposed to save them. General Imamura's mistake was arrogance. He believed that piling up strength made him stronger. He didn't realize that in modern war, a fortress without mobility is just a tomb. Rabaul stands today as a monument to that hubris. In the jungle, you can still find the Zeros, vines growing through their cockpits where they were parked in 1943, waiting for a takeoff order that never came. 100,000 men, trapped by their own walls, defeated not by invasion, but by the arrogance of believing they were untouchable.